This is the Ready Set Podcast, and here's your host, me, Joe Persinger. Hey, welcome to the podcast. We are live now on all of our podcast platforms. Please check us out on YouTube, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Podcast Addict, and wherever you may find your podcasts, except Mixcloud and Stitcher. And I hope I mentioned that we are also available on Spreaker. That's like the main one I used. All these platforms, the RSS feed is based off Spreaker. So if you want to go to Spreaker, you can definitely check it out there. And what a nutso week we've had since episode 38 was put up. I actually meant to get to Nancy Pelosi and her illegal Salon visit and blowout that she had, but I guess I just ended up skipping over that. So I'm going to jump into that really quickly. In the beginning, we're going to talk about Joe Biden finally getting out of the basement, and how I guess he came here to Kissimmee yesterday. We're going to talk about that as well. And then, if you've been living under a rock for the last week, you've probably noticed that Bob Woodward has another book he's trying to hawk to the American public, and using recorded tapes from his conversations with Trump to disparage him at, about 45 days out of the election. And we are going to talk about that and what it's going to take to get Trump elected for a second term. All right. Well, this is your one-stop shop, current events and politics podcast. If society's a joke, then we're just here for the first set. Are you ready? Set podcast! All right, so Nancy Pelosi got in a little bit of heat last week and basically delivered a political gift to the President of the United States by deciding she needs a blowout for her hair before going on a MSNBC segment on a Sunday a few weeks ago. Apparently, from what it seems to have happened, her people reached out to this salon owner, or someone that works within the salon, the manager, I guess, because, owners, some do the day-to-day, but it doesn't sound like the lady that owned this place was involved in the day-to-day. She just kind of heard about what was happening. So she went to go to a blowout. There's security footage of this, and if you can see it, you can definitely tell that she was wearing a mask, but underneath her chin, everyone else was wearing a mask. And just, it's the blatant hypocrisy of the whole situation. I mean, we saw this with Lori Lightfoot in Chicago a few months ago, so this really shouldn't be like any news. I guess why it's news is, Lori Lightfoot's just the mayor of, a top 5 city. She's not the Speaker of the House. Nancy Pelosi is. And Nancy Pelosi was also in a salon that happened to be within her own district. So it's very interesting that here's the person who oversees Article 1 of the Constitution, the one that makes the laws for the nation, and she doesn't know what the law that is being mandated in her own district is? Does it seem a little weird? Almost as if she knew and she was just going against the rules because she can. It's really weird. So if this is your first time hearing about this, first of all, I'd like to know what rock are you living under? And then I guess the other side of it is, if you could probably argue, well, one reason I didn't hear about this is the press wasn't reporting on it. And when they were reporting on it, they were downplaying it to the fact where they were just literally begging people to move on from it. Really? Well, was the media ever begging anyone to move on from from anything that Trump has ever said? When impeachment failed, did they say, well, we just need to move on from this? No, they didn't. They even suggested, Nancy Pelosi even suggested that this was a setup. I mean, it's a very interesting way to spin a record. I will give her that. But that's not what happened. Those cameras have been in that salon for 5 years, according to the owner. Nancy Pelosi's people reached out to the salon to get her hair done. I'm really struggling to find where the setup in this whole matter is. I mean, it's just obvious, classic case of someone getting their hand caught in the cookie jar, and we're saying, what, these aren't oatmeal raisins? I thought they were oatmeal raisins. They're still fucking cookies, you fuck. They're still fucking cookies. I mean, this is the definition of pissing on my shoes and telling me it's raining. And if the hypocrisy isn't enough, did you hear what she said about this business owner and what ended up happening to the business owner? The lady picked up and left. She's not in that salon, in that, I can't even speak anymore, in that location anymore. Nancy Pelosi chased her out of town. The leader of the House can't even take responsibility for what could be spun as a miscommunication in a worst case scenario. And you know, no matter how she would spin it, the media would protect her, as we kind of just talked earlier. But no! Pelosi has to seek out retribution to the salon owner in the form of bad press and character assassination, which means this business owner, like I just said, had to close shop and move. This is the party of the people. At this point, if you're dumb enough to think there's actually a two-party system, you're going to get what you deserve. Corporate Republicans and corporate Democrats wear different colors, but they are on the same team. Anyone see what Joe Rogan said when he ripped Pelosi? I mean, Joe had a great take on it, and from what I understand, he was basically saying you have to be a dirty fucking sleazeball to be in politics, and not to mention to last as long in politics as Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden and some of these other swamp creatures have. It's insane. Like, you have to be able to just, like, think about what she did. She chased out a small business owner out of her own district. The whole reason she has a job, why she runs for an elected office, is to protect business owners and the citizens within their country. Would you, whoever is listening to this, agree that she has at least done any of those two things? Is she protecting business owners? Because last I checked, there are people taking shits in the middle of the street in San Francisco. And it's pretty hard to run a business when you got a pile of shit, literally and figuratively, sitting outside of your fucking front door. Getting fired up. It's been a while. Let's turn on the audio here. Making me seem a little crazier than I actually am. Or it could just be my volumes here. Anyway. Where am I? Let's see here. I'm sorry, I'm fucking with the volume. Okay. So, speaking of swamp creature politicians, let's jump into Joe Biden really quick. First of all, this sleepy fuck walks back his mask mandate that we talked about, I think it was last episode, and instead turns his mask mandate, his national mask mandate, into, probably because the feedback and the polling of it didn't work out too well for him, so it turns into a recommendation for all governors. Oh, interesting. Fucking Joe Biden. This guy is a puppet. No puppet. You're the puppet. Yeah, exactly. So we're going to trust this old doddering fool? Is that really what's going on here? He wants to take away fossil fuels. He wants to cripple the energy industry. You know, I don't know about you, but I kind of need my gas to drive around. I mean, don't get me wrong. Electrical vehicles, Teslas, all those seem really cool. They're sleek looking, they're quiet, they're very futuristic, but you can only go like 300 fucking miles in those things. And then you gotta wait 4 fucking hours for it to recharge. You know what I like? Driving in my car, going to a gas station, waiting 3 minutes, and then being able to drive it another 400 miles. Yeah, I know, crazy shit, huh? But this fuck wants to get rid of, basically decimate the energy industry. It's insane. I mean, and then on top of that, just, Joe Biden, I approve it. I mean, the guy signs, every time he fucking talks, it sounds like he just rolled out of bed. I'm Sleepy Joe, I approve this message. And then, you know, the recent one here is the two gaffes that have been coming out is he called it a Harris administration with Joe Biden. And then Kamala Harris comes out and calls it the Harris administration with President Joe Biden, a Biden-Harris administration. Yeah, nice save there, lady. Ugh. I mean, are they... This is like... This is like Weekend at Bernie's, meets some movie about a Trojan horse being introduced into another civilization. It's just crazy. And then on top of that, this sleepy fuck shows up here to Kissimmee yesterday. It's actually called, I think it's called the Heritage. Is it the Heritage Center? It's basically, if you're a local to the area, you're gonna go down 192, take that past John Young, past Orange Blossom Trail. About another few miles, it takes a bend. Right at that bend towards St. Cloud is right where this area was that he was at. And this guy fucking comes out, gets introduced. Doesn't even come out after being introduced, so he probably fell asleep or didn't hear anyone calling his name. Then comes out and starts playing a song called Despacito. And it was awkward just watching it. I mean, just when you thought someone couldn't trump President Trump with the Taco Bell Cinco de Mayo thing of 4 years ago, you got Joe Biden here playing. I mean, it was so obvious. Someone in his staff was like, Joe, just play this. Pander to the Puerto Ricans. Just get the fuck out of here, Joe Biden. Just seriously. This guy is one slip away from death. I mean, if he slips in the bathroom and hits his head on the kitchen sink and goes down almost in a similar fashion the way Roger Ailes did, then we're going to have Kamala Harris as a vice president. And I mean, you might as well just make AOC the vice president at that point, which you can't because she's not fucking old enough yet. But in the next 5 or 6 years, God fucking help us if that is the case. Oh my God. Alright, where the fuck am I here? Alright, let's jump over to this fucking Woodward and Bernstein thing. Well, it's really just Bob Woodward. I lumped in Bernstein because he's... So for those that don't know, Woodward and Bernstein are the deep throat Watergate guys. I'm sure the average person does not understand that, why these two fucks are being given such a mantle. Oh, it's because they did something. They took down a president 50 years ago. Yeah, most of us weren't even alive when these guys were fucking relevant. But here you have the mainstream media, mainly MSNBC and CNN, elevating these two fucks because they're the last ones to take down a Republican president. And it's just crazy. So basically what had happened, or what is going on, I mean, this thing's already basically on its last breaths in the news cycle, is that Bob Woodward had been talking to Trump over the last, it's been at least 6, 7, 8 months, maybe longer, and I think it was about, 18 hours total of interview time that he did with him over the course of that time, and he recorded them all, and some of these tapes were leaked, and basically what came out was that Trump was attempting to downplay the coronavirus because he didn't want to incite panic. So Democrats pounce on that, and they basically use that to try to create a narrative within the media. And this is just, a week ago it was Trump said, something disparaging about the U.S. military. Now this week it's Trump was trying to downplay the coronavirus. I think we're starting to see a pattern here. And my point is that, well, let me get back to what I was saying here, is that Woodward had released... Nubs? Hold on, I go check on what's going on here. Hey! Alright, I'm back. Just the Amazon package delivery guy. So what Woodward had done is basically release this tape to create this narrative that Trump was trying to downplay the virus. Well, everyone else was playing it up, which is fake news. This is straight up fake news. If you look at what was going on at that time, you have, at the end of January, okay, well, let's start here. If you go back to January, the reason the Democrats got caught with their fucking pants down in the midst of this whole situation, why they had no clue coronavirus was coming, was because they were too busy impeaching the president. It's funny, I actually had an Uber ride recently where I was talking to this guy who was clearly an anti-Trumper. He made it pretty clear where he stood, and I just let him know, hey, I kind of disagree with that, so if you want to kind of move the conversation somewhere else, I'm not opposed to that whatsoever. Oh, he kept going. But it was pretty cordial, which I found interesting. And I remember at one point him kind of using all these media talking points about coronavirus and how he botched it and this, that, the other. And I asked this guy one quick, simple question. Do you remember what was going on in January prior to the coronavirus? And he said, yeah. And he goes, what did he say? He didn't give me the answer I was looking for. It was basically Trump was doing stuff. And I go, no, the Democrats were too busy impeaching him. And I thought I'd get a little bit more pushback, but he kind of agreed with me, which kind of tells me that he probably realized in that moment he was talking to someone who knew a lot more than he did. So the point is that when Woodward is saying that Trump was downplaying this, or claiming that, so Trump was downplaying it because he didn't want to incite panic, but they're kind of leaving that latter part of the phrase out, saying that he was downplaying this, ergo, that's why everyone's fucking dead. But what's really going on here is what people don't really truly understand is while the Democrats were impeaching Trump, and then when Trump implemented that ban from China, Joe Biden called him xenophobic. Well, what was Nancy Pelosi doing? She was telling everyone to go down into large groups into Chinatown, hang out, have fun, and spend money. So was Bill de Blasio. All these Democrats. They were all doing the same thing as Trump. They were downplaying it. The difference is he wasn't trying to create panic. The other people were sending you into danger. And then they were trying to impeach the president, which created even more danger because they were too busy not paying attention to the matters at hand. Just trying to get their own political W's in the basket. In-fucking-sane. So let's go back to Bob Woodward here. And this... Bob Woodward is a fucking joke. You know that high school? You know high school? Anyone remember high school? It's been a little bit for me, but I do remember it. You know, it's that magic time in someone's life where adulting starts to slowly trickle onto the conveyor belt we call life. Do you remember the popular kids? Or the alpha popular kid within that group? You know, he's a star athlete, the tall, pretty boy who fucked your girlfriend, or that guy that went viral on TikTok, or if you're old like me, maybe they were running the school paper. Regardless, your rival was doing something that you felt you could never attain to. But that's not really what we're talking about here. You know, I went through junior high school with a kid named Jordy Rifkin. I don't remember much, but that fuck is bald now. Funny how time can side with the underdog. I should remember this guy. I don't know why, but he just always felt the need. You know, he had elf ears and he was short. I mean, I guess between the two of us at the time, he was probably... We were about the same size, but I was a jellyfish. I had no spine whatsoever, and he could smell the fact that I was just spineless, basically. And I basically spent the next 6 years of my life being not tormented by this guy, but usually the target of his attacks. And I even want to say this guy maybe had it out for me would be the way to put it, but, you know, he would just take every shot at me that he could possible. Case in point, the one that really sticks out is going back to, I'm going to use some dates here, February 12th, 1998. We were actually on our way to this point in Central Florida. There's a hotel about a few miles down the road that we actually stayed at. And I went there. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We go back a year before. This is when we went to New York in 98. I didn't bring a camera down here. So I back then... this is one of those huge fucking box cameras you could stick a huge VHS tape in, and I took that fucker to New York with me on a choir trip, and I remember being in Deerfield High School's lobby waiting for the buses to be boarded for us to go to the airport, and me having that big camera. And he, you know, looking back, there must have been maybe some jealousy factor involved. I mean, it was no secret that I was like the poor kid in our school. And now I had this, you know, pretty expensive camera. So I wonder if there was a an envy thing going on there, but he just used the opportunity to just pick on me in whichever way. And again, it makes no sense. He wasn't doing it directly to my face. He was doing the passive-aggressive version where it's just loud enough for me to hear it. Anyway, sorry for kind of going into that little side story. So anyway, let's get back to Bob fucking Woodward. So this whole Jordy Rifkin, the high school, popular guy, and I'm not comparing Jordy to this popular he was popular, but he was not, an alpha by any stretch of the imagination. And this is kind of how I look at Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward. Two guys that peaked a long fucking time ago. These are the two WAPO journalists known for taking down ex-President Nixon, like we talked about earlier, with an inside source famously known as Deep Throat. So these two fucks have been riding high since the early 70s on a presidential takedown. Many, many books have been sold. Every time you hear the word Scandal Gate, enter the name Scandal and then you throw the word Gate after it. It's because of these two fucks, and the Watergate Hotel, I should say. But these two fucks are the ones that brought it to life. And their source, Deep Throat, which I think that guy's name was Mark Felt. So, the last book I think Bob Woodward put out was all conjecture. I want to say it was a year or two ago. And it was just a book he put out, and everyone was, all the Trump haters were, basically masturbating to it. And it kind of came out that whole book was not based on any facts or source material. It was just all conjecture. So he kind of, lost a little bit, if you will, a little credibility there. So the new book was researched over multiple interviews, some taking place early in the year as the China virus was, taking off. The tapes were released earlier last week, and of Trump telling us what we already knew. But if this is so alarming, why didn't Big Bob sound the alarm? He's a journalist, isn't he? I mean, if he was so worried that Trump was downplaying this to the effect to what he's claiming now, why didn't he come out and say it? It's almost as if Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi were out and about saying the same thing. Ergo, why Big Bob didn't come out with this information last February. So watching the media carry drool cups for Sleepy Joe while carrying pitchforks and tiki torches against Trump is beyond frustrating. It's obvious what's going on here. And I'm not the only one that sees this, because this isn't a one-way street here. Moderates on both sides and independents are beginning to feel frustrated as well. And the dichotomy between how these former journalists, and I'm using former journalists in air quotes, and how they treat Biden versus Trump is a chasm that just keeps growing. We had the Atlantic piece from last week that we talked about where Trump was they claimed that Trump was making disparaging remarks about the U.S. military. And now we have this story, which has been in the news cycle for the last week. And like I said, it's kind of on its dying breaths. I mean, I would even say by this week. It had a 60 minutes. It aired out. Basically, it was getting a lot of momentum because leading up to a 60 minutes interview that Bob Woodward is going to do on Sunday on 60 Minutes. And then I want to say by yesterday, nobody was even fucking talking about it. But you can see what the idea here is. They're just trying to keep these negative stories in the cycle. It's almost as if it's a pattern. It's almost as if, bear with me here, that these stories just happen to be coming out as the polls tighten. It's weird. I can't explain it. Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein are those two fucks in high school who crashed your weekend kegger, fucked your sister, vandalized your car, and gave your parents an upper decker in the bathroom upstairs. But 20 years later, one brother is in a loveless gay marriage and works in a Korean bathhouse. The other brother is a balding Jewish lawyer in a loveless marriage whose kids hate him and wishes every night he could go back to his glory days at Highland Park High School where he is screwing the big-breasted girl in the soprano section. Oh, I mean, not that any of that's true. I mean, it's all completely fictional, made up here on the spot. And now that brings me to my next point. How the fuck is Trump going to get elected? Or excuse me, re-elected. He was already elected. So I found that there's about 3 pillars. I mean, maybe 3.5. I'm not even going to count the 4th one as a pillar. It's almost like a sub-pillar to a pillar. And we're going to go over these 3 pillars to get Trump elected here. And we're going to start with pillar number 1. Rural counties. You know, it's no secret everyone has already made up their minds. It's almost perplexing to see the media. You know, like last night, I think Trump did a town hall on ABC News with George Clinton stooge Stephanopoulos. And, you know, I mean, honestly, at this point, it just seems that this is just, big media attempting to sell ad space and make money. It worked. I watched. And it's no secret that everyone has made up their minds already. The selling point to this town hall is these were undecided voters. I'm sorry, it's not 1992. If you haven't made up your mind by now, you're probably living underground somewhere. Or not in America. So, this whole election, this 2020 election, is basically going to be a turnout game between urban counties and rural counties. But they don't necessarily cancel each other out. I mean, what if Latinos and African American voting blocks don't show up? Well, we're going to talk about that in a second. I mean, that could spell disaster for Biden in battleground states. So, if you're looking at California, Illinois, New York, Washington, Oregon, these states are going to vote for Joe Biden. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. You know, those states, I mean, I did this last night. I looked at this last night. Illinois hasn't voted for a Republican since Bill Clinton. I mean, Florida, this election is going to, you know, I'm probably getting ahead of myself here, so I'm just going to stick to the course here. So, the Latino and African American votes are very important for Biden because if he lags in those in a similar fashion in the battleground states, what he does with these groups in states like California, Florida, Texas, you know, ones that go red or blue, it's not going to matter because those states are going to go the way those states go. That's why this whole like mail-in balloting thing in California, who really gives a... I mean, I understand what they're trying to do because you have to, you know, snuff it out there, but like really, are we really worried about California mail-in vote? I mean, that state's gonna go for Joe Biden, so what the fuck does it even matter? But I understand why they do what they do. But if these Latino and African American voting blocks don't show up for Joe Biden in these battleground states, that could spell disaster. And a high turnout in rural counties will be the foundation to a Trump victory, but it won't put him over the top. He's gonna need someone else for that. And to solidify a win in any battleground or toss-up states, Trump is going to need the suburbs. Now, white college-educated women, you know, the media portrays these counties as virtually unwinnable. But how many silent supporters are out there in the suburbs? Which brings us to our second pillar. You know, 6 months ago, I would have been apprehensive about Donald Trump's chances in these outskirt city counties. But between the obvious politicization of COVID-19 and the looting and rioting permeating through various urban centers without any intervention from local state political leaders has changed that paradigm. I mean, do you really think suburban voters want all that looting and rioting making its way to those quiet streets? We'll use Kenosha as a microcosm. All that looting, and Minnesota too, all that looting and rioting was kind of originally down towards, you know, the downtown business districts of that city. But, you know, once they burned and looted the whole fucking thing, they needed a new spot to destroy. And where did they go? The suburbs. Do you think the people in the suburbs want that? Do you think people in the suburbs who are trying to sleep and work 40-hour work weeks, if they even have jobs at this point? Because chances are the people that are sleeping are the ones that are working. The people in the streets are the ones that are not. And do you think the people that are sleeping, working, paying taxes want to listen to a bunch of fucks yelling and screaming outside on their streets? I have neighbors that blow off fireworks every 4th of July and New Year's Eve. If I could call the cops on them in this state, I would, but that fucking shit's illegal down here, and as much as it sounds that I'm mad about it, I'm not. I just like to get some sleep every once in a while, at least those 2 days a year. Anyway, I've learned to live past it. That's just how it goes. But point is, do you think everyone in these suburbs wants to be harassed like that? And do you think if they are being harassed like that, they're going to vote for someone that is going to continually let them be harassed? No is the answer to that question. Using the Uber index, which is one of my favorite things to use here on the podcast, mostly everyone I've spoken with has some form of disdain against the looting and rioting and revisionist media bias right now. This is the crux to either a loss or a victory in the suburbs. No matter which side you're on, this holds true. This is Joe Biden or Donald Trump. Democrats, they need the suburbs in their favor because they're not going to get rural counties. They know they're getting the urban centers. Those are going to definitely, that's generally why you have these blue states voting blue states. There's like Los Angeles County is probably that has a similar population to the state of Wyoming. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's why states, those bigger states, those big city states tend to win because their population centers are so big in urban districts. So in these urban districts, if only maybe 50% of the people show up to vote, that's still at least 5-1 to someone in a rural, the population in a rural county. So no matter which side you're on, you need the suburbs. And the Republicans are exactly in that same boat. So whichever party shows up en masse at the polls will have a heavy advantage. But the suburbs are more than just college-educated white women. You have Hispanic minorities, African American minorities. And like I said earlier, if you're in, California, Illinois, New York, red states, even Kentucky, and those minority voter turnouts aren't going to weigh as heavy as they are in the battleground states. And these two voting blocks could put either candidate over the top. And again, that's why it's so important to have these two groups on top of the suburbs in your favor, because this is what could win you your state. This could be that 20,000 difference like Trump had in Wisconsin. And now, with everything that's been going on, with the Real Clear Politics has been taking averages of all the polls out there, Biden is trailing Trump in Florida with the Latino vote. And I should probably drive down the street and check this out. What is that? About a month ago, 3 weeks ago, right down the street from here, someone took about 40 signs. They were Latinos for Trump, and basically the whole intersection was just had these signs sticking up. And I want to say 3 days later, someone pulled them all out. Well, good news, folks. They're back, baby. And someone put those Latinos for Trumps over there, and I should probably drive over there and see if they're still there. I'm guessing they're not. But that should tell you something. Because this is a very, very Democrat, this is a very blue counties, Orange and Osceola. So Trump trails Biden with African Americans, and the Democrats are definitely aware of that. And you could see that they're doubling down on trying to court never Trumpers and African Americans because they know Joe Biden's struggling with the Latino vote. And if you look at the numbers for Latino voters 4 years ago, I believe Hillary was beating Trump by a minimum 15 points in that category. And now it's reversed. Now you have Trump over Biden by at least 15, 20 points in that same category. And in those battleground suburban districts, that could prove deadly for Joe Biden, or that could give Trump the margin of victory with, thousands, if anything. And even with all of those various voting coalitions, there's still one group that can tilt this whole election in either candidate's favor. But let's go over what we've covered so far. The rural vote will go to Trump, and overall turnout is key. The urban centers will go to Biden, but minority turnout is also key. They say that might be one of the reasons Hillary lost some of these battleground states, because the urban centers were not churning out African Americans and Latinos in the way they were for Barack Obama. And as we just covered, Latinos are leaning to Trump, especially down in Miami-Dade County. And again, maybe Joe Biden will win Miami-Dade County. But if you have a third of those Latino Cuban Americans voting for Trump, it could tilt the state red. And that could be a death blow. Well, it would be a death blow to Trump if he lost the state. But I think Biden might still be able to eke out a win even if Trump takes Florida. So it just really perplexes the mind why the Biden campaign isn't down here. Instead, they're relying on Mike Bloomberg to just influx the state with $100 million in cash in their favor. Fuck if I get it. So this only leaves one group left who can really determine the election. And this brings me to our last pillar: independents. The only information out there amongst this group is all in the polling data. And as we all know, the polls can't really be relied on. Most polls give, the advantage to Biden, whichever poll it may be, but it's just weird. I mean, it's odd. It's almost as if I've seen this episode before. So it's hard for me to rely on all that polling data. And with the media gaslighting or using the force, if you will, against the American public. That's what so you always hear this term gaslighting. Oh, they're gaslighting the American public. And not a lot of people understand what gaslighting is. And just to clarify what we're talking about there, I think there was an old movie called, is it called Gaslighting? I think it was. And it's about this guy, I think it was in the 40s, who was turning slowly, I think he wanted to get a divorce. So he wanted to make his wife feel like she was going crazy. So he would turn down the gas lamps in the house ever so slightly, and when she would walk out into the room, and she'd be like, "Honey, is it darker in here?" He's like, "No, it's actually all the same. It's not darker at all. Are you going crazy?" And then by the time it's dark in the room, she's like, "I swear, there's no light in here." He's like, "Oh, there's plenty of light. You're just a crazy bitch." I mean, that's what people are referring to when they're gaslighting. But I think they need to update this term. I mean, given the fact that, the majority of the soy boys here in this country watch Star Wars, maybe they should just call it using the Force. For instance, if I'm the media, I'm going to walk up to you, wave my hand in your face, and say, like the Force thing, whoosh, and that counterclockwise 3/4 of a circle. Donald Trump is a racist. Donald Trump is a racist. Donald Trump wasn't elected legitimately. The Russians did it. Donald Trump wasn't elected legitimately. Our Russians did it. Obama didn't spy on the Trump campaign. Obama didn't spy on the... Let me get where I'm going here. The FBI in the FISA court are a legitimate entity. The FBI in the... It's basically what it is. The media is Obi-Wan fucking Kenobi. Or Darth Vader. Again, however you want to look at it. I mean, can you even argue Obi Kenobi was bad? I mean, good? Whatever. This isn't a Star Wars podcast. And, oh God, is that Disney at the door? They probably heard me talking about Star Wars. Oh crap. So it's impossible for anyone to use the polls or the small sample size of these polls as the pulse of a nation. It makes no sense, honestly. You're going to take 800 people and then use that to represent what 330 million people think? Go fuck yourself. Everyone I've talked to that's an independent leans to a slight center-right position. Slight. I mean, they're definitely between center-right to center-left. And I'm not talking about the center-left where they're screaming and yelling and rioting the streets. I'm talking about a center-left person who basically is anti-establishment, has the same views that I do, but would prefer Bernie as president. I mean, that's basically what it is. And even if they are, like I said, left, they still want law and order. I guess that's really what the difference. It's not about who they're supporting. It's even if center right, middle, center left, they still want law and order, and they support the police and think whatever is going on with Black Lives Matter is, neo-Marxist, revisionist talking points. And they also see through what Democrats are attempting to do by using Joe Biden as a Trojan horse. Really, I call it a weekend at Bernie's Trojan horse. I mean, I'm telling you, this Weekend at Bernie's metaphor works. You know, it's propping him up, you know, on his it's propping a dead man up on his 2 feet. On one side is the DNC, you know, hold all the weight, you know, on that shoulder, you know, keeping him up. On the other is Kamala Harris, making his mouth move and having her hand on the puppet strings, or really, up his anus, and then, you know, speak, Joe, speak. And that's what these independents are seeing. And to further this perception, you have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris both making the same gaffe, calling it mistakenly the Harris-Biden administration. Oops. Is that a Freudian slip? I mean, an accidental reveal of what's going on behind the scenes? I mean, the basement strategy, the gaffes, no press conferences, the lack of traveling, Harris being out and about, but not Joe Biden. I mean, people see through this crap. And not only does he not leave the basement, he never leaves Delaware, let alone Wilmington. I mean, people see what's going on here. Biden is hiding, Harris is out and about. And if I was Joe Biden, I'd make sure he has someone tasting his food for the next, few months. And the contradictions and how both these candidates are treated by the media is just astonishing. Astonishing. I mean, really, it's not, because we saw this 4 years ago with the way Hillary Clinton was treated, the way Nancy Pelosi was treated, versus the way Trump is treated and other Republicans. So really, it's not that astonishing or surprising. It's just, what is astonishing about it is the fact that they still carry on this bias, this biased treatment of these politicians while still claiming to be neutral to the whole process. I mean, go fuck yourself for real. And I think everyone has their mind made up at this point. I mean, out of these 3 groups highlighted, the entire election is going to come down to a large group of undecided independents and will be decided by the turnout of the suburbs and the rural voters. God, I can't wait for November 3rd. And that's going to do it for us this week. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I really appreciate it. Please check us out on Facebook. Give our Ready Set podcast Facebook page a like. Run over to Speaker. Give us a like there. We're also on YouTube. Please subscribe to the podcast. Smash that notification bell. And please also check us out on Apple Podcasts. Write a review. Give it 5 stars. Google Podcasts, same thing. Spotify, iHeartRadio, Castbox. I can never get that one. Podcast Addict, and wherever you may find your podcast, except on Stitcher and Mixcloud. For some reason, I've never bothered to put the podcast there. This is your one-stop shop, current events and politics podcast. If society's a joke, then we're just here for the first set. Thanks again, you fucks, and we will see you tomorrow. That is right, tomorrow. Have a good one, you fucks. Thanks for listening to the Ready Set Podcast. Check us out next week, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter and look for us on our YouTube channel. Ready Set Podcast.